Happy new moon, Yasharala, Shabbat Shalom. Thank y'all for joining me on this study that will be found in the book of Enoch, chapters 85 through 90. It is one of the Enoch's visions within the first book of Enoch, and it is referenced to be called the animal apocalypse. Now, we'll get into all those details once we get started, but right now, let's open up with a prayer. All together, Yasharala. Heavenly Abba, high in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Please have the Ruach give those that's in this study the wisdom for understanding, for guidance, and please protect this line of fellowship, Abba. Tudah for this day of rest. In the name of Yeshaya HaMashiach, Amen. All right, here's our little visual going now. The animal apocalypse. Some things I need to clear up before we get started. A lot of times, including myself, before we get educated on things, apocalypse is a word that's usually associated with like end times, but that's not the origin of the word meaning. The original meaning for even the book of Revelation was the apocalypse of John, because apocalypse simply means to uncover or reveal, which hence why it's now called the book of Revelation, because it is unveiling Bible prophecy of what's to come in the latter days, as an example of the book of Revelation to the apocalypse of John. So when you hear the animal apocalypse, it isn't like meaning the end of animals. It means the revealing through animals within this parable. This parable reveals the history of mankind through animals. Hence the name, the animal apocalypse, the revealing of the history of mankind through animals. And like I said, this is one of many Enoch's dream visions. He has quite a few in the book of Enoch. You can find this in chapters 85 through 90. And just know that every Enoch translation can have different chapters for it, but it should be 85 through 90 in most Enoch translations. We're going to be referencing, because like I said, this is the entire history of mankind in this parable. So we're going to be referencing to my world history chart, and we're going to be touching on the timing frame that we're in on this chart, based on this chart with what we're reading in Enoch. And then you know the deal. I'll have other resources to try to make as much things make sense as possible. I believe the reason why I chose to do this, study is because in doing the Messiah studies, I watched two different people that denied the Messiah that were using this parable to deny the Messiah. And it just goes to show you that anybody can butcher scripture and interpret it wrong to lead people astray. So after you watch this, there's no denying that the Messiah is written in the book of Enoch, and he's a part of the history of mankind through the animal apocalypse. That being said, let us begin officially. Before I wanted to get started on the actual reading, I want to give references that the Most High using animals to illustrate mankind is nothing new throughout Scripture, from so-called lost books like Gad the Seer, to the New Testament that we're going to read in the book of Acts, and the Old Testament with Daniel. There's a variety of parables with animals mixed with man, or a symbol of man. We have Gad the Seer. If you haven't read that, I have a study on that. Or you could just find the PDF book on my website, becomesetaapart.com. But let me read. And it came to pass, when I finished crying out, I opened my eyes and saw a yoke of oxen led by a donkey and camel. Coming up from the Kidron stream, the donkey on the right side of the yoke and the camel on the left. And a great voice like the roll of thunder was following them, crying with a bitter voice, seer, seer, seer. That's prophet, prophet, prophet. These are four mixtures that confuse the people of Haya. For impure and the pure have been mixed. And this is the mix of the clean animal, his people, with unclean animals, donkey and camel. Something, I'm reading this because this is going to be relatable in this parable. And the impurity took over purity, a mixture from Seir, which is Edom, to rule over them, to increase power over and betray a righteous doer, to destroy holiness, to crown wickedness, to set up impure matters in the skies of purity. And after the voice, a great quake occurred that shook over the impurity and flew the donkey and camel into the moon with the stormy wind. And the moon was opened and looked like a bow, a semicircle, and both her points reached towards the ground. That's describing a sliver moon. The two unclean animals went in the moon and made a sliver moon. This is why we do full moons, y'all. This is a sign of impurity. I just thought I'd add that little note on this new moon study. All right, now in Acts, everyone that's in the truth that's watching this, I'm sure every one of you have read Peter's dream vision of the animals, right? And people try to use Acts 10 for making food clean, but we know that this is not describing about the animals being clean. This is talking about man, as we read Acts 10. And he, Peter, became very hungry and would have eaten. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance and saw heaven open and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a sheet knit at the four corners and let down to the earth, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creepy things, and fowls of the air. And then going to verse 34 to get to the point of the conclusion of what he saw and the understanding of it. Peter opened his mouth and said, of a truth I perceive that Elohim is no respecters of persons. Talking about all of these beasts. But in every nation, he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. So this is describing the Gentile nations. And then last but not least, Daniel 4. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him. Let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and they in the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomever he will, and setteth up over it the basis of men. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass as an oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till that his hairs were grown like eagle feathers, and his nails like bird claws. All right, just wanted to give a little bit of idea, because this is a very pretty close depiction idea of what this parable is about. It's everything's animals, and we're going to have to decode it. This parable took me longer to decode than expected. Some spots, which I will elaborate on when we get there, I'll tell you my thought process and why I gave the interpretation that I gave. But all right, enough of the preparation to the introduction. Let's begin officially reading, starting with chapter 85. And as we see here, this is from the R.H. Charles translation, and his second dream vision in the book of Enoch, which is the history of the world to the founding of the Messianic kingdom, aka New Jerusalem, the millennium reign. And after this, I saw another dream, and I will show the whole dream to thee, my son. And Enoch lifted up his voice and spoke to his son Methuselah. To thee, my son, will I speak. Hear my words, incline thy ear to the dream vision of thy father. Before I took thy mother Edna, I saw in a vision on my bed, behold, a bull came forth from the earth. And that bull was white. Okay, this bull obviously is like the beginning, the first half is pretty straightforward. This is obviously Adam. And when we get started on the colors in this parable isn't actual like skin color. It's symbolic. Every color in the parable is symbolic of something. And I have notes below here in the purple. And then we have colors. White means pure, good, righteous, okay? And then red, for the most part, would mean some form of blood. We'll talk about it when we get there. And black is darkness/evil, which is, all supported by scripture, if you know your stuff. And then when we see different breeds, I wanted to speak on this from the beginning. Right now, in the beginning of the history of mankind, man will be described as bulls. And that's why I got the notes here. Animals, a bull is a man, and we're about to get to Eve, which is described as a heifer or cow, which is a woman. Every time we'll start seeing that there is sheep and there's lambs. When we see a new breed, that means we're in a new era on his timeline. We're in a new phase of mankind per se. You'll see how that is understandable when we get there. So I'm just trying to make, this is a very detailed parable with, in the entire parable, you have to decode everything. So I'm just giving you as much understanding as we get going so you can comprehend as I read. All right, so we have the bull was white, and that was Adam. And after it came forth a heifer, we know is Eve. In Genesis 1:27. So Elohim created man in his own image. In the image of Elohim created he, him, male and female created them. And along with this latter came forth two bulls, which is Cain and Abel. Bulls equals man, male. In one of them, black, which is, like we talked about, evil, and the other red, symbolic of blood. Genesis 4:1-2. And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Most High. And she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Verse 4. And that black bull, Cain, gored the red one, Abel, and pursued him over the earth. And thereupon I could no longer see that red bull. But that black bull grew, and that heifer, Genesis 4:17, and Cain knew his wife. This is Cain's wife right here. And she conceived and bare Enoch, and he built a city and called the name of the city after son Enoch. Went with him. We know, and let's understand something too. We know that the Bible, scriptures, doesn't give us everyone's name and talk about every single person's wife, children, and so on. So some of these details, just like we're talking about this heifer, and it doesn't have a name, it's because scripture doesn't give it a name. And because this parable can, give more understanding, but doesn't mean it's written verbatim elsewhere like I'm matching up right now. Went with him, so Cain's wife, And I saw that many oxen, which is Cain's seed, proceeded from him, which resembled and followed him. Jasher 1:33 through 36, not 34, 33. And at that time, Cain went out from the presence of the Adon, from the place where he was, and he went moving and wandering in the land towards the east of Eden, he and all belonging to him. And Cain knew his wife in those days, and she conceived and bare a son. And he called his name Enoch, saying, in that time, the Adon began to give him rest and quiet in the earth. And at that time, Cain also began to build a city. And he built the city, and he called the name of the city Enoch, according to the name of his son. For in those days the Adon had given him rest upon the earth, and he did not move about and wander as in the beginning. And Irad was born to Enoch, and Irad begat, was it one of these, Methuselah, or so whatever, how you want to say these three names, his line. The many oxen. Here's the beginning of Cain's line. All right. And that cow, now we're back at Eve, that first one, that's how we know, very clear, the first cow went from the presence of that first bull, Adam, in order to seek that red one, Abel, but found him not, and lamented with a great lamentation over him, and sought him. And I looked till that first bull, Adam, came to her and quieted her. And from that time onward, she cried no more. And after that, she bore another white, pure man, a white bull, Seth. And after him, she bore many bulls and black cows. So this is what I was saying. It doesn't explicitly talk about the other children of that Eve had, but they make it clear that she had more children here. Genesis 5:3. And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. And I saw in my sleep that white bull, Seth, likewise grow and become a great white bull. And from him proceeded many white bulls, and they resembled him. And so now we know that this is the righteous lineage of Messiah. The Seth, Enos, Canaan, Enoch, Methuselah, Noah. This is obviously, these are the white bulls that's being referenced as the seed of Seth. And they begat many white bulls, which resembled him, one following the other, even many, which we can read apart. I have Genesis 5:6-32, but we're not going to read all of that. It's just the lineage of Seth is what is implying here. If you want to go read all of that, by all means, go for that. So I have a little bonus within here. The following chapters, we see we reading Enoch 85-90, and we know that there's we talked about in the beginning that there's many visions in Enoch, and this is another history vision summarized in periods. And so I'm going to use the Enoch history vision, another one that's in Enoch 93, with in terms of the timeline of here. So where we're at now. And after that, Enoch both gave and began to recount from the books. And Enoch said, concerning the children of righteousness, and concerning the elect of the world, and concerning the plant of uprightness, I will speak these things. Yea, I, Enoch, will declare them unto you, my sons, according to that which appeared to me in the heavenly vision, in which I have known through the word of the holy angels. I have learned from the heavenly tablets. And Enoch began to recount from the books and said, I was born the 7th in the first week, while judgment and righteousness still endured. All right, well, that is where we're at in the nutshell right now. 86. So the first few chapters are pretty short, but 89 and 90 are not. So let's keep it going. So now we're at the fall of the angels. and a demoralization of mankind. Chapter 86. And again, I saw with my eyes as I slept, and I saw the heaven above, and behold, a star, which is an angel. And every time there's something new that pops up, even though a star isn't an animal, I just put it under the coded because most are animals. I'm going to put them here as the notes for your looking references. If I usually have them written next to it, but all of the notes that I'm decoding is going below in the purple. So, behold, a star angel fell from heaven, and we know this is very familiar in Scripture, Luke 10. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. And then we know about the Lucifer verse in Isaiah 14:12. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Art thou cut down to the ground, which dideth weaken the nations. And I always just want to add Job 38:7 every time I talk about Isaiah 14:12 to make it clear that the son of the morning, a star, a morning star per se, is just simply a son of Elohim, an angel. Okay, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of Elohim shouted for joy. Morning stars are sons of God, angels. Continuing, and it arose and eat and pastured amongst those oxen, talking about in general mankind. So we have the angels coming down, pasturing amongst those oxen, where we have one star, a star. And after that, I saw the large and black oxen. And when I'm doing this study, I have looked up and found a couple of other people's understandings, and I saw one that said that this was Cain's seed, and I would have to disagree because there's the timing of it specifically is right after that one angel came down and was amongst man, and immediately after, for the first time, we have the word large and black oxen. This is giants. This is this first seed coming from that one angel that fell first. And behold, they all changed their stalls and pastures and their cattle and began to live with each other. And again, I saw in the vision and looked towards the heaven, and behold, I saw many stars, angels descend and cast themselves down from heaven to that first star. And they became bulls. And what do we have? We decoded what bulls are. They became man amongst those cattle and pastured with them amongst them. And I looked at them and saw, and behold, they all let out their privy parts. I mean, how literal could it get in this I don't parable vision? They let out their privy parts. So the angels came down and became men, the image of men, and they let out their privy parts like horses and began to cover the cows. And we know cows are women, and the oxen men. And man, First Corinthians fits superbly with this. It talks about begin to cover the cows. This is exactly what First Corinthians 3-10 is talking about. The covering of women is the man, and it makes that so because of the angels. Let's read. But I would have you know that the head of every man is Messiah, and the head of a woman is the man, and the head of Mashiach is Elohim, Most High. Every man praying or prophesying having his head covered dishonors his head. But every woman that prayeth or prophesies with their head uncovered dishonors her head. For that is even all one as if she were shaven. So pretty much saying if a woman's acting like a man spiritually over her man, that is unrighteous. For if the woman be not covered, let her also be shown. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered. In other words, a woman needs a cover. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of Elohim, but the woman is the glory of man. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Here we go. This is the main line, or my bad, well, 9 and 10. Neither was man created for the woman, but woman for the man. For this cause ought the women to have power on her head. Why? Because of the angels. Wow. All of this is about covering. And women in modern day time, let's say not angels, let's say a demonic man. How do a woman stay away from an angel or a demonic man? A righteous cover. And that's what we're seeing here. They began to cover the women. And this is why 1 Corinthians is speaking about angels and the purpose of women having a righteous cover. All right, continuing. And they all became pregnant. Why? And bear elephants, camels, and asses. So these are weird looking animals. I think this is why these are the animals picked for the Nephilim. And let's read about those. So right now we just see giants, large men, right? Giants. And then we got a bunch of weird looking animals. And I think this also illustrates that, because my wife came to me and was talking about how someone was speaking online about a weird looking clown type Nephilim giant. And she was saying how they were speaking on the head looking weird or indifferent, and how just the idea of clowns, I don't know if y'all have heard of this theory, that the idea of clowns, what clowns look like, are what giants look like. That's just the idea of it, if you have never heard that. But there is many type of Nephilim, sons of the angels, which we see here: elephants, camels, and asses. All unclean animals, and most of them look pretty goofy. Outside of my my donkey, I think donkeys are cute, but camels and elephants are pretty weird looking. But let's read all that. Genesis 6, 2 and 4. Oh, that's a good point, Riley. Yeah, this elephants and asses are political animals. They use Republican Democrats, right? All right. The sons of Elohim, angels, saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. When the sons of Elohim came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Continuing in this same point, all in the same verse 4, Enoch 6 now. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and begat us children. And Simjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone, which have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual precautions, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. This swear they all together, and bound themselves by mutual precautions upon it. And they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. Yeah. And these are their names. So we have the leader right here is Simjaza, whichever these names. Excuse me about these names. Y'all know what's up. I want to see, because it says that's first angel, and I'm going to speak on this because there's a lot of prominent angels that could fall under this. We're going to talk about the angel Azazel. Being a candidate here. We know Gadiel was the angel in the garden. But now, in this context, Simjaza, who was their leader, sounds like he could fit in that candidate as well. So there's three figures that is really prominent as who is this first star that have fell from heaven. And we'll expound more on that as we go through the study. And then Enoch 7:11 from the Sefer translation. Every translation is different. So some books I use because they translated different, that gives more meaning to what we're reading. And when we talked about the different type of Nephilim, well, 7:11 in the Sefer tells us that it was the women conceived and brought forth Nephilim, and they bore to them three races first. Look at there, three races. The great Nephilim, the Nephilim brought forth the Nephilim, the Nephilim, and whatever y'all want to call the rest. And they existed, increasing in power according to their greatness. So there's like the different races of Nephilim, etc., etc. All right. And all the oxen feared them and were affrighted at them, and began to bite with their teeth, and to devour, and to gore with their horns. We're going to see a lot of things with horns. Animals that have horns display power over the people. Horns is power, knowledge, power, position of authority, which we also can kind of get that from if you study the Daniel visions of the animal visions in Daniel as well, horns represent leadership and authority in that vision as well. And they began, moreover, to devour those oxen, mankind. And behold, all the children of the earth began to tremble and quake before them and to flee from them. Let's read this in Enoch 7. And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants whose height was 3,000 ells. That's one. That's really large. I looked this up before. 3,000 ells is like a skyscraper. The giants pre-flood were massive, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men would no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind, as we see here. And they began, moreover, to devour those oxen. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. All right. So the cross-reference vision of the history of mankind in Enoch 93. And after me there shall arise in the second week great wickedness, and deceit shall have sprung up, and in it there shall be the first end, and in it a man shall be saved, and after it is ended, unrighteousness shall grow up, and a law shall be made for the sinners. We know that's what we're getting to with Noah. All right, so we have the advent of the 7 archangels. Very short chapter, 87. And again, I saw how they began to gore each other and to devour each other, and the earth began to cry aloud. Let's read Jasher 4, 17 through 18. And every man made unto himself a god, and they robbed and plundered every man his neighbor, as well as his relatives. And they corrupted the earth, and the earth was filled with violence. And their judges and rulers went to the daughters of men and took their wives by force from their husbands according to their choice. And the sons of men in those days took from the cattle of the earth, and the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the air, and taught the mixture of animals of one species with another, in order therewith to provoke the Adon. And Elohim saw the whole earth, and it was corrupt, and all flesh has corrupted its ways upon the earth, all men and all animals. Oh yeah, I mentioned. I don't think I even mentioned someone talking about the blood in the comments of Abel. Yes, obviously, Abel. I don't think I explained that clearly. The Abel was the red heifer because blood represented death. Obviously, the shedding of blood and of Abel was why he was red. All right. Continuing, verse 2, chapter 87. And I raised my eyes again to heaven, and I saw in the vision, and behold, there came forth from heaven beings who were like white men. All right, so this part can be both. When we know that angels, we are made in the image of angels. We Genesis 1:26. And Elohim said, let us, when you understand who us is, it's the sons of Elohim, make man in our image, after our likeness. So we know that angels can look like men, but the word white here, obvious, we have symbolically, it means pure. And I also want to specify that angels are actually white for the most part, and we'll see this with the comparison of Noah in a little bit. So this could be pure angels, but angels also are white. So take that what you want. And let's read Enoch 106. And this is where we're going. Oh, yeah, this right. I have it right here with Noah. And after some days, my son Medusa took a wife for his son Lamech, and she became pregnant by him and bore a son, and his body was white as snow. This is talking about Noah. If you've never read this before, Noah's body was as white as snow. So anyone that's ever told you everyone is black in the Bible or a part of Messiah's lineage, you call it a book of Enoch a liar, because this is a straight description of his body, and you'll see why it's so important to understand this, because it freaks them out, because this wasn't normal at the time. So I am saying that people of color was on the earth at this time. They were the majority, if not maybe everyone. But that doesn't mean that every single person in history, especially in the lineage of Mashiach and well, we're not even at the Israelites yet, but just the lineage of the righteous, we're not all colored or brown, darker skinned folks. Let's read on. So his body was white as snow and red as the blooming of a rose. And the hair of his head and his long locks were white as wool. And his eyes beautiful. And understand, Noah was made perfect. There's nothing wrong with him right now. Okay. And when he opened his eyes, he lighted up the whole house like the sun, and the whole house was very bright. And he said unto him, I have begotten a strange son. So yeah, Noah didn't look like the normal man at that time. Diverse from and unlike man, resembling the sons of God of heaven. So Noah, being having a body white as snow, resembled the sons of Elohim, angels. So take that what you want. I do believe most of the colors in this parable is symbolic of a meaning of, like I said, here of purity, but just a little fun fact there. And his nature is different, and he is not like us, and his eyes are like the rays of the sun. All right. All right, so these are, we went over these, and now we're finishing verse 2. And 4 went forth from that place, and 3 with them. So these are talking about the angels. So 4 went from that place, talking about heaven. Enoch 9, who are the 4 angels? Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. So these are the 4 angels that are in this vision right now. Verse 3, and those 3 that had last come forth grasped me by my hand and took me up away from the generations of the earth, and raised me up to a lofty place, and showed me a tower, and a tower raised high above the earth, and all the hills were lower. And so let's read what's going on right now in Genesis 5. And Enoch walked with Elohim after he begat Methuselah 300 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with Elohim, and he was not, for Elohim took him. So right now, he you know, he's in the heavens. He's not necessarily taken for good, but this is the best time to insert that Enoch was taken up permanently. Also in verse 3 here, 17, 1 and 2, Enoch 17. And they took and brought me to a place in which those who were there were like flaming fire. So angels can transform, shapeshift. They can be man, they can be fire, they can be an element. They're a spirit. Spiritual world is way more vast than what we can fathom. And when they wished, they appeared as men who look like white men. And they brought me to the place of darkness, and to a mountain, the point of whose summit reached to heaven. All right. We're talking about the mountain. Look at that. And all the hills were lower. He was taken to a lofty place. High mountain, exactly what's going on in Enoch 17. And one said unto me, remain here till thou see if everything that befalls those elephants, camels, and asses, so the Nephilim, and the stars, angels, watchers, and oxen, the wicked mankind, and all of them. That is chapter 87. Like I said, the first few chapters are very fast, but boy, it gets real thick here after chapter 88. So the punishment of the fallen angels by the 4 archangels that are predominantly in this part of Enoch. And I saw one of those 4 who had come forth first, and he seized that first star, which had fallen from the heaven, and bound it hand and foot, and cast it into an abyss. Now that abyss was narrow and deep and horrible and dark. Let's read Enoch 10, 4. And again, the Adon said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness and make an opening in the desert, which is Dudael, and cast him therein. So we're going to see that Semyaza is also bound, and all these first fallen angels that were part of the Mount Hermon are all bound right during this time. But the reason why I got Azazel in this position over Semyaza is because it's really kind of hard. Because like I said, you have Gadiel, which we'll speak about later in the study. You have Semyaza, and then you have Azazel, and they're both very predominant of the named for coming down and being the first associates of the Watchers to do things with man and women. But the reason why I said Azazel fits the first star is because of the description of being bound hand and foot and cast into the abyss, singled out first. Then it's no other than Azazel that is singled out first and bound hand and foot first. And then Azazel is the only angel that all sin is put on him. If you had to pick the first angel to actually fall, yes, Gadiel, whatever how you say his name, is the angel that was in the garden, and he was cursed in the garden. But Azazel, I believe, was the first one that came down. And then where Semyaza, this Semyaza was the first one that came down as the whole after the first. When it talks about Semyaza being their leader, I believe he was the leader of them that came after the first, which was Azazel. That's just my understanding, okay? As we looked up here, just referencing back, yeah, when it says that first star, and then it says, and again, I saw in the vision, look toward heaven, and behold, I saw many stars. So I'm saying Semyaza was the leader of the many stars that came down and was all like, if we're going to do this together, because he was the one that made that pact. If we're going to do this together, then we need to make an oath on Mount Hermon, which is what we read here in, read here with Semyaza. So that's just my understanding on if you're looking to put names on, like who was the first angel? I believe Gadiel was in the garden. Azazel was the first one to come down after the days of the garden, and Semyaza was the leader of the flock of 200 some odd angels that came down and impregnated women after the first. All right. And one of them, Azazel, and like I said, with verse 1 and verse 2, Azazel fits this description better than any other angel that we can compare it to with the scripture we have in Enoch. So not only was Azazel bound hand and foot and cast into abyss of darkness, Azazel also was the one that drew a sword and gave it to those elephants, camels, asses. Then they began to smite each other, and the whole earth quaked because of them. And we see that in Enoch 8:9. And Azazel taught men to make swords, drew a sword. Who was the one that gave him a sword? Azazel. And knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of and and the beautifying of eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all the coloring tinctures. Continuing, and as I was beholding in the vision, lo, one of the angels, this is Michael, of those four who had come forth, hurled them from heaven. So threw them down from heaven, and gathered and took all the great stars, whose privy members were like those of horses, and bound them all hand and foot, and cast them in the abyss of the earth. So like I said, all of the people of Mount Hermon, all of the watchers were bound hand and foot, but Azazel was the one singled out first and was the one that drew a sword. And we can read about this in Enoch 10:11. And the Adon said unto Michael, go bind Semyaza and his associates, who have united themselves with women, so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanliness. So do we see the separation of what I was speaking of, how Azazel is singled out first, but then when he goes and binds the group of them that came, Semyaza is the one that is singled out first. So we have the first one that fell, and then we have the leader of those that fell in the group after the first. And now in Enoch 69, this is later judgment of the names. And behold, the names of those angels. And I'm not going to read all of these angels. This is just for your reference. And we see Azazel mentioned amongst them as well in the group of the angels that were cast into the abyss. All right, so now we're about to get into the meat of the study. It's going to get a little bit more harder to decode some of the animals, persons here and there, and it gets just a little bit more intense with some of the details. All right, 89, the deluge, the flood, and the deliverance of Noah. And one of those four went to that white bull, Noah, and instructed him in a secret without his being terrified. He was born a bull and became a man. Now, this was one of my hardest things to decode. I remember I know Amy knows what I'm saying. I went into the living room one of the days, and Kane was like, man, there's something that was written when I'm over here doing this parable, and I don't really know what to do with it. Like, it says he became a man. Why did he become a man when everybody's an animal? So what does it mean to become a man if literally there is no real men? And Genesis 1:26 came to mind, and that's what I'm rolling with. It makes sense to me, so let's read. And Elohim said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over every creepy thing that creepeth upon the earth. He gave Noah dominion over the earth, which means Noah, when he got off the ark, he made a covenant with Noah, and Noah and his sons was given dominion over all of the earth. And Noah was obviously even given dominion that was leader over his sons, which are animals in this parable. There's only two beings that are called men outside of the angels, or the image of a man like the angels. There's only two in this entire parable, and that was another thing, trying to figure out what the two had in common. And the other person is Moses. And I feel like Genesis 1:26 can be consistent with both of those. What's the meaning of calling Noah in Moses from a bull to a man? Is that I believe that he was given dominion, just like Moses was given a covenant, was renewed with Moses, just like with Noah, and he was given dominion over the people in the covenant of Elohim. So that's what I'm going to roll with. That's the best understanding I can come to with why Noah and Moses are the only ones that are called man, because they were given authority over man. And yes, the world itself, it really. Hold on, let me think. I think there was something else I wanted to add there. Right. Yes, exactly. Moses had his face lighting like the sun. And so yeah, and I wanted to say on Adam, when it was like but Adam was given dominion over the earth. But the thing with Adam is that this story starts Adam was given dominion over the earth, and so he was a man, but he fell and it became a bull in a sense, if we're talking in the context of that. And that's why, in my head, it can make sense why Adam wasn't depicted as a man in the beginning, if this is what it's about. But let's just move on. And built for himself a great vessel, which is obviously the ark, and dwelt thereon. And three bulls, obviously Japheth, Shem, and Ham, dwelt with him in that vessel, and they were covered in. Genesis 6, 13 and 14. And Elohim said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, rooms shalt thou make in the ark. And yeah. And again, verse 2, and again, I raised my eyes towards heaven and saw a lofty roof with 7 water turrets thereon, and those turrets flowed with much water into an exclosure. And I mean, if you don't believe in flat earth and the firmament, then what does this mean? But that's the point. Most people that believe in the globe don't read Enoch. So let's continue. And I saw again, behold, fountains were opened on the surface of that great enclosure. And that water began to swell and rise upon the surface. And I saw that enclosure till all its surface was covered with water. Genesis 7, 11, and 12. The same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, opened on the surface of that great enclosure. And that water began to swell. This was that the great deep opened up, broken up. And the windows of heaven were opened. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Verse 4, and the water, the darkness, and mist increased upon it. And as I looked at the height of that water had risen above the height of that enclosure and was streaming over that enclosure. And it stood upon the earth. And all the cattle, speaking of mankind, always got to remind you when it's talking about cattle. That's why I put all of these. Make sure you realize, stay in the parable with me. Cattle is mankind. Of that enclosure were gathered together until I saw how they sank and were swallowed up and perished in that water. But that vessel, the ark, floated on the water, while all the oxen and elephants and camels and asses, the Nephilim, the wicked men, because we know all the righteous has died or was removed, or was in the ark, I should say, because the wicked men in the Nephilim sank to the bottom with all the animals, so that I could no longer see them, and they were not able to escape, but perished and sank into the depths. Let's read Genesis 7, 19 and 21. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubit upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered, and all flesh died that move upon the earth, both fowl and of the cattle and of the beasts, and every creepy thing that creepeth upon the earth, every man. Verse 7. And again, I saw in the vision till those water turrets were removed from the high roof, and the chasms of the earth were leveled up, and other abysses were opened. Then the water began to run down into these till the earth became visible. But that vessel settled on the earth, and the darkness retired, and light appeared. But that white bull, which had become a man, Noah, came out of that vessel, and the 3 bulls with him, and one of those 3 was white like that bull, and one of them was red as blood, as we see red and blood is closely related, and one black, and that white bull departed from them. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and read Genesis 8 first. And Elohim spoke unto Noah, saying, Go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. Bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee of all flesh, both of the fowl and of the cattle, and every creepy thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. All right. This is I highlighted the verse 9 about the colors of the sons because this was another debatable thing when I looked up. I've seen some that was using the colors as real colors in a sense of, like I said, like skin color. And I don't believe anything in this parable is about skin color, even though I brought up the fact, it was really a fun fact that I just brought up about the Noah being actually white and the angels being white as light. And that's really what it is. When it talks about an angel being white, it's more about that they are a light, which looks like white, right? But I when I looked this up, I saw someone that had that Japheth, because I can see what they were going with. The fact that Noah was a white man, and if he had a black wife, a darker complexion wife, because obviously what we just read, everyone else had melanin. No one else, regular men, did not look like Noah in that time. So I can see that they were like, oh, well, there was one white one red one, because King David, if you don't know, King David is the described of having red skin, which was the idea of why the person that I saw looked up had Shem being red, meaning like brown skinned people. So you have Japheth representing white skin, Shem representing brown skin / red, and then Ham being black skin. But I don't agree with that the parable is about skin color. I believe the white bull was Shem, because the white has been consistent with purity from the beginning of this study. Or Adam would have been white in the parable. I mean, in the what we read about Noah being white wouldn't have made any sense in Enoch 108 if Adam was white and other people were white like Noah around, right? So that makes it clear that Adam wasn't white, which means exactly that I don't think this parable is about with color is symbolic of real skin color. So that being said, the bull that was like Noah, the righteous line was Shem. And the one that was red, I would say Japheth. And the thing that I come to the conclusion with Japheth with red representing blood is the fact of in the latter day, I mean, in the days after pretty much Babylon, the majority of the captive nations that has shed the blood of his people are the line of Japheth. Think about the Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog, the kingdom that will come to war against Mashiach in millennium reign, that's Japheth. Rome is Japheth. Antiochus, the nation against the Book of Maccabees, Japheth. So that's my understanding of the red, is that Japheth is bringing a lot of bloodshed to his people. And one black, and I think this would ironically could fit the skin color of the seed of Ham, and also what they're depicted as in scripture as being a evil seed and a lot of wickedness coming from Ham. All right, and now still in connecting with the timeline, also in Enoch 93. And after that, in the third week, at its close, a man shall be elected as the plant of righteous judgment, and his prosperity shall become the plant of righteousness forevermore. All right, so we know this is Noah. This is where we're at. Coming off the ark, and Noah was given the earth and everything. All of mankind is coming from Noah. So let's go and just recap now that we're after the flood and things are going to thicken up a little bit now. We have beginning of mankind. We talked about Adam and Eve, Seth. We talked about that the black bulls that came from Cain. Main characters talked about, obviously, Adam and Eve, Seth, Enoch. Talked about Noah all the way through Shem. And then with just like with this, this yellow chart is the line of Messiah, the Israelites. And the one of them was a white bull like Noah, Shem. Because see how that yellow line continues through Shem. And then here we are, post-flood, Ham and Japheth. And that's what I'm saying. When we're about to get into also showing here, when we get into captivity, majority of these captives, I would say outside of Babylon, the majority of these captives all the way down are all Japheth, if I'm not mistaken. And that's why when we look here, we can see it. We see Japheth, we got Greece, Persia, Rome. And then at the end of the days, we have Gog and Magog, all from, as we see right here, Magog. All of that bloodshed, almost immediately into captivity. It's majority of the captives are Japheth / Edom. And I believe Edom intermingled with any and every wicked seed Esau could get his hands on. Obviously, Esau intermingled with him as well, but Esau intermingled with anything unrighteous, really. All right. All right, we're Enoch 89. Now we're in Enoch 89. This is just broken up to make it easier to have all these notes together. We're going to be covering verses 10 through 27. Now I'm saying this is the thick of it. Now things are going to get a lot being said, kind of just like in the story. Like we see how open everything is pre-flood. It's not that much written in here, right? And then immediately after the flood, it gets real thick. Well, that's exactly how this parable reads. And they began to bring forth beasts of the field and birds, so that there arose different generations. So here we go. This is post-flood. So this is all from the death of Noah to the Exodus. And right after post-flood, we have the different nations coming from, obviously, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, which is all of these. And we're going to label some of these nations, not all of them, but we're going to label a lot of these nations. But these are all unclean animals because they represent Gentiles, which is what I showed you as an example in Gad the seer, and the Peter dream vision was exactly that. Was all the beasts of the field representing the nations of people, Gentiles. And among them was born a white bull. This is Abraham. And let's read Genesis 10. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah. And just really, this is just a reference to what we're reading about with all the animals. Shem, Ham, Japheth, and then we have Japheth, where the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after their tongue, after their families, and their nations. We have Ham, and then we have Shem. And then also Genesis 11, 10 and verse 27. And yes, and this is just showing that Shem, these are the generations of Shem, and that Abram came from the generations of Shem. All right. Just little references there of the timeline with scripture, other scripture. And they began to bite one another, but that white bull, Abraham, which was amongst them, begat a wild ass, which is Ishmael. And we're going to go over scripture of that in a second. And a white bull, which is Isaac. So we see when father has a righteous son, they look just like them. The description is the same, which is why I was saying Shem should definitely be the white bull after Noah. He should look the same because this is a spiritual symbolic parable and it's not about skin color. With it, and the wild ass multiplied. All right, there's actually a verse. There's some verses that actually match up perfectly with the Enoch vision of the animals matching the people. Let's read on that now. Genesis 10 and Genesis 11. Oh, my bad. 16 and 17. And the angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of Hayah also said to her, you are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for Hayah has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. Wow, look at that comparison right there. Ishmael, a wild ass, a wild donkey. So as we add down here, if you're keeping up, we add a wild ass / donkey are Ishmaelites. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him. He will live in hostility towards all his brothers. And then Genesis 17, 19 and 20. And Elohim said, Sarah, thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee, behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. As we see here, says, and the wild asses multiplied. Man, this thing lining up. A lot of animal connections. I mean, all throughout scripture. It just shows you how much Enoch is infused in the word. And like I said, the more you understand, the less you are fooled. This may seem like just a funny little parable of animals being decoded, but what's happening is that you're getting more understanding on the history, and it's getting solidified with all of the books that we're using within a vision that was written before all of it happened. The more you know, the straighter your walk and the stronger you are in this walk of truth. Like I said earlier, this parable was used for anti-Messiah video, which you're going to see That's impossible. That is impossible, but we'll get there. All right, verse 12. But that bull, Isaac, which was born from him, begat a black wild boar, Esau. And we know why black, we know, let's use the codes: black, evil, darkness, wild boar, a pig. So a wicked, unclean swine is described as Esau here. And a white sheep, Jacob. What do we see at the top? I'm going to scroll all the way up. What did I say at the top? When we get to a new breed, we're getting into a new era. Now we're officially, the first time we've heard of sheep as being a description of man here. So now let's touch on that. Why all of a sudden? Because sheep is directly linked to Israel, Yasharallah, which is Jacob. So Jacob is called a sheep because Israelites are the sheep of the kingdom. Let's read. This is 13. Matthew 10:6. But go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Look at that connection there. This is why Jacob / Yasharallah is called a sheep. See how this stuff connects? It's gorgeous, gorgeous. Psalms 100, verse 3. Know ye that the Adon, he is Elohim. Haya is Elohim. It is he that has made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. That is coming from David, an Israelite. Isaiah 53:6. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. And Haya has laid on him the iniquity of us all. All right, just sheep references right there. But let's continue. And the former begat many boars. So this is talking about Esau's lineage. But that sheep begat 12 sheep. Very obviously the sons of Yaakov. Let's read Genesis 25:25. And I don't have all of Genesis 30, but Genesis 30, you can read on your own if you choose. And that's just that's just the seeds of Yaakov. But let's read Genesis 25:25. And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. So just the birth of Esau coming, and then, like I said, just a reference, Genesis 30 covers the birth and the sons of Jacob. All right, verse 13. And when those 12 sheep had grown, they gave up one of them to the asses, Ishmaelites. And those asses again gave up that sheep to the wolves, Egyptians. And that sheep, which is Joseph, grew up among the wolves. We all know this story. We all know it, but let's read it. Genesis 37:28. Then there passed by Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph unto Egypt. There you go. The donkey, the wolves. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto here an officer of Pharaoh. All right. Verse 14. And the Adon brought the 11 sheep, so all the sons of Yaakov outside of Joseph, to live with it and to pasture with it among the wolves, Egyptians. And they multiplied and became many flocks of sheep. Let's read Jasher 55. And Joseph dwelt securely in Egypt, and the whole land was under his advice, and his father and all his brethren dwelt in the land of Goshen and took possession of it. And Yaakov and his sons dwelt in the land of Egypt, the wolves in the land of Goshen, and they took possession in it, and they were fruitful and multiplied in it. And the wolves, Egyptians, began to fear them, and they oppressed them until they destroyed their little ones. And they cast their young into a river of much water. But those sheep began to cry aloud on account of their little ones, to complain unto their Adon. Jasher 67, 51, and 52. And the king ordered a proclamation to be issued and a law to be made throughout the land of Egypt, saying, every male child born to the Hebrews from this day forward shall be thrown into the water. And Pharaoh called unto all his servants, saying, go now and seek throughout the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel are, and see that every son born to the Hebrews shall be cast into the river, but every daughter you shall let live. Oh, how nice of him. Continuing, verse 16. And a sheep, Moses now, which had been saved from the wolves, fled and escaped to the wild asses, Ishmaelites or Midianites. And I saw the sheep, how they lamented and cried and besought their Adon with all their might, till the Adon of the sheep descended at the voice of the sheep. That sheep is Moses, from a lofty abode, and came to them and pastured them. Let's read Exodus 3. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to a mountain of Elohim, even to Horeb. And the angel of Haya appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And when Haya saw that he turned aside to see, Elohim called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here am I. Go and gather the elders of Yasharallah together and say unto them, Haya Elohim of your fathers, Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov appeared unto me, saying, I have surely visited you and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. Verse 17. And he called that sheep Moses, which had escaped the wolves Egyptians, and spoke with it concerning the wolves, that it should admonish them not to touch the sheep. And the sheep Moses went to the wolves according to the word of the Adon, and another sheep, which this is where Aaron comes in, met it and went with it, and the two went and entered together into the assembly of those wolves, and spoke with them, and admonished them not to touch the sheep from henceforth. Exodus 5:1. And afterward Moses and Aaron went and told Pharaoh, thus says Haya Elohim of Yasharallah, let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. Verse 19. And thereupon I saw the wolves, and how they oppressed the sheep exceedingly with all their power. And the sheep cried aloud. And the Adon came to the sheep, Yasharallah, and they began to smite those wolves. And the wolves began to make lamentation. But the sheep became quiet, and forthwith ceased to cry out. Exodus let me see. That a verse where I think it was just I think right here I have 8-11 saying that this is just summarized in Exodus 8:11 is what I put as a note here. It looks like make sure. No. This is just a typo then. I don't think that. I think that's supposed to be Exodus 11:1. I think that's a typo because this is where we're at right here. Yeah, this is actually should be here. 8:11. And Hiah said unto Moses, yet will I bring one plague more upon Pharaoh, upon Egypt. Afterwards, he will let you go hence. When he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out hence together. Yes, because right after that, in verse 21, it says, and I saw the sheep till they departed from among the wolves. But the eyes of the wolves were blinded, and those wolves departed in pursuit of the sheep with all their power. And the Adon of the sheep, Israelites, went with them as their leader. And all his sheep followed him, a shepherd. And his face was dazzling and glorious and terrible to behold. Exodus 13. But Elohim led the people about through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Yasharallah went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt, and Hiah went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. Verse 23, but the wolves began to pursue those sheep till they reached a sea of water, the Red Sea. And that sea was divided, and the water stood on this side and on that before their face. And there Adon led them and placed himself between them and the wolves. This is that pillar of fire between the Israelites and the Egyptians at the Red Sea. Verse 25, and as those wolves did not yet see the sheep, they proceeded into the midst of that sea, and the wolves followed the sheep, and those wolves ran after them into that sea. And when they saw the Adon of the sheep, they turned to flee before his face. But that sea gathered itself together and became as it had been created, and the water swelled and rose till it covered those wolves. And the angel of Elohim, which went before the camp of Yasharallah, Exodus 14, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Adon and Hiah caused the sea to go back from a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Yasharallah went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were all wall unto them, on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and horsemen. Have y'all, we were reading this, but are y'all actually visualizing this vision that Enoch had? The actual Red Sea, sheep walking through it, wolves chasing the sheep, the water coming in, and everything's animals. Like, this is legit what Enoch said he saw. So just for fun, like, really try to visualize Enoch's vision when we're reading this. All right, last verse right here, verse 27. And I saw till all the wolves who pursued those sheep perished and were drowned. Thus Hiah saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. All right. Enoch 93. Where are we at in the timing of the weeks? And after that, in the 4th week, at its close, visions of holy and righteous shall be seen, and a law for all generations. And in its closure shall be made for them. So we're right here. Moses and the Israelites are about to receive the law. All right. Still in Enoch 89. Now we're at the portion of the Israelites in the desert, in the giving of the law, in the entrance into the land. Verse 28 of chapter 89. But the sheep escaped from the water and went forth into a wilderness, where there was no water and no grass. And they began to open their eyes. We're going to see this a few times. We know opening your eyes is, this is spiritual. This is wisdom, Torah, received instructions, and to see. I say all the time when we're reading, like in the gospel portions, and the Messiah says it over and over again, blessed are they that have eyes to see and ears to hear. Every time you see that, this is spiritual speaking. And I saw the Adon of the sheep pasturing them and giving them water and grass, and that sheep going and leading them. And that sheep, which is Moses, ascended to the summit of that lofty rock, and the Adon of the sheep sent it to them. And after that, I saw the Adon of the sheep stood before them, and his appearance was great and terrible and majestic. And all those sheep saw him and were afraid before his face. So we know Moses' face, I don't think I actually put that here, but Moses' face shined like the sun. We mentioned that earlier. And they all feared and trembled because of him. And they cried to that sheep, which is Moses, with them, which was amongst them. We are not able to stand before our Adon or to behold him. Exodus 19. It's kind of everywhere, which one I didn't write those verses up there. 1, 16, 18, 20, and 21. In the third month, when the children of Yasharallah were gone forth out of the land of Mizraim, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. And it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of a trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because Hayah descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. And Hayah came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mount, and Hayah called Moses up to the top of the mount, and Moses went up, and Hayah said unto Moses, Go now, charge the people, lest they break through unto Hayah to gaze, and many of them perish. So that sounds exactly like what we just read. Continuing, verse 32. And that sheep which led them again ascended to the summit of that rock, Mount Sinai. But the sheep began to be blinded into wonder from the way which had showed them. But that sheep wot not thereof. So Moses didn't know of the falling away. And the Adon of the sheep was wrathful exceedingly against them, and that sheep discovered it and went down from the summit of the rock. It came to the sheep and found the greatest part of them blinded and fallen away. Ain't that crazy? The same terminology that we talk about in our time. The great fallen away, right? Exodus 32. And Hayah said unto Moses, Go and get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made them a molten calf and have worshipped it, and have sacrificed thereunto, and said, these be thy gods, O Yasharallah, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Verse 34. And when they saw it, they feared and trembled at his presence and desired to return to their folds. And that sheep took other sheep with it and came to those sheep which had fallen away and began to slay them. And the sheep feared its presence, and thus that sheep brought back those sheep that had fallen away, and they returned to their folds. Let's read Exodus 32. Verse 20 and then 26 and 27. And he took the calf which they had made and burnt it in the fire and ground it to powder and strawed it upon the water and made the children of Israel drink of it. Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, who is on Haya's side? Let him come unto me. All the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him, and he said unto them, thus says Haya, Alahayim, Alahai of Yasharallah, put every man his sword by his side and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp and slay every man his brother and every man his companion and every man his neighbor. Talks about and began to slay them. Verse 27. And I saw in this vision till that sheep became a man. Here we go. There was that, once again, here we go. Moses and Noah in this vision are the only animals that become a man. And like I said, the only thing that I can think of is that the Most High is giving Moses possession of the people, with especially where we see right here, and he built the house of the Most High, which is the tabernacle. So it's like Noah and Moses was given possession over the animals in a way that they became in that position to be a man. That's the best of my understanding there. And then Moses built a house, the tabernacle, for the Adon of the sheep, and placed all the sheep in that house. Exodus 42. And on the first day of the first month shalt thou set up the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation. And I saw till this sheep, and this is Aaron, which had met that sheep, Moses, which led them, fell asleep, died. And I saw till all the great sheep perished, and little ones arose in their place, and they came to a pasture and approached a stream of water. Let's read Numbers 20. And Aaron shall be gathered unto his people, for he shall not enter into the land which I have given unto the children of Israel, because he rebelled against my word at the water of Meribah. And we see the stream of water, the waters of Meribah. And then also Numbers 14, 33 to 35. And your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. After the number of the days in which ye search the land, even 40 days, each day for a year, shall ye bear your iniquity, even 40 years. Ye shall know my breach of promise. I, the Adon, have said, I will surely do it unto all the evil congregation that are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall be consumed, and there they shall die. Have y'all noticed that the whole story of the wilderness going to the promised land is foreshadowing the millennium kingdom? Millennium kingdom, there is no death. But when we go into the kingdom, it's only those that will on the final judgment throne after the millennium kingdom, the only ones that will pass that test are those that are perfect. And we see that everyone that sinned, even Moses, didn't enter the promised land. Only 2 entered the promised land that was a part of the original people. And we'll touch on that in a second. But we see 1 sin stopped Moses from going in the promised land. 1. Because you're either perfect or you're not. The road is more narrow than you think. Always think about that. It is. Not saying that's the burden we have. It's just symbolic of how real it is. Moses sinned 1 time on the account of him being after the Exodus, and it prevented him from going into the promise. All right, let me see. 38 now. And so I say, and the reason why I read about Numbers 14, about the 40 years and all of them being consuming in their death, we see, I saw till all the great sheep perished and the little ones arose in their place. So all the adults of that time perished except 2, which is what we read in Numbers 14. Then that sheep, Moses, their leader, which had become a man, withdrew from them and fell asleep. And all the sheep sought it and cried over it with a great crying. Deuteronomy 34. So Moses, the servant of Hiah, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of Hiah. And the children of Yasharallah wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning for Moses were ended. And now verse 39. And I saw till they left off crying for that sheep and crossed that stream of water, which is the Jordan. And there arose the 2 sheep as leaders. And here, these are the only 2 adults that didn't perish, Joshua and Caleb. If you're following the Torah portions, you know what's up. In the place of those which had led them and fallen asleep. Let's read Numbers 32:12. Save Caleb and Joshua, for they have wholly followed the Most High. The save is saying everyone fell. The verse prior, all the people will fall and be consumed, the old of that generation, except Caleb and Joshua. And then now in the book of Joshua, chapter 3:17, and the priests that bear the ark, this is talking about passing over the Jordan of the covenant, Hiah stood firm on the dry ground in the midst of Jordan, and all the Israelites passed over on dry ground until all the people were passed over Jordan, clean over Jordan. And then the last verse, and I saw till the sheep came to a goodly place in a pleasant and glorious land. And I saw till those sheep were satisfied, and that house stood amongst them in the pleasant land. Joshua 18:1. And the whole congregation of Israel, children of Israel, assembled together. It set up the tabernacle of the congregation there. And the land was subdued before them. All right. So we're going down this timeline, little by little, going down this timeline. So last time we checked here, we were just post-flood. And now we're focusing on the line of Shem. We read about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. We read about the black wild boar of Esau, the sheep of Jacob, and then his 12 sons. Then we go down and we are focusing on the Exodus story with Moses and Aaron just passing the reins to Joshua. All right, so this is where we're at in the history of mankind. Also got the Bible timeline here. We're still very, very beginning of the timeline. So I'm saying, look at all the meat. All right, so still in chapters 89, verses 41 and 50. You're saying is this graphic? This graphic is the world history chart. Yes, you can. I think it's under the downloadable. No, or the link. But yes, you can look at this. I believe it's pretty sure it's somewhere on my study tools on my website for this timeline. All right. Chapter 89, verses 41 through 50. And sometimes their eyes were open and sometimes blinded. So if you go into what we just looked at, if you look at the timeline of the books, we just talked about Joshua leading and Caleb leading them into the promised land over Jordan, and then they subdued the land, or the majority of the land. Now we're just going to run right through Judges right here. This is Judges. When it says, and sometimes their eyes were open and sometimes blinded. That is a summary of the timeline of the book of Judges. Till another sheep, which is Samuel, which is now we go from Joshua to Judges in one line right into 1st and 2nd Samuel now. Till another sheep, Samuel arose and led them and brought them all back, and their eyes were opened, as we see in 1 Samuel 3. And Samuel grew, and Hiah was with him, and did let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Yasharallah, from Dan even to Beersheba, knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Most High. 42. And the dogs. All right, we have a new character singled out, and this is the Philistines. The dogs and the foxes, the Amorites / Moabites, and the wild boars, which we already decoded, began to devour those sheep till the Adon of the sheep raised up another sheep, which would be King Saul. And this is a ram. We spoke about earlier about horns representing leadership, authority. Well, that's exactly why Saul is given horns, which is the difference between a sheep and a ram. A ram is a male sheep with big old horns, where you get the trumpets, the shofars. So ram represents some type of authority. From their midst, which led them. Let's read in 1 Samuel 9, 17 and Nehemiah. And when Samuel saw Saul, Hiah said unto him, Behold, the man whom I spake to thee of, this same shall reign over my people. 1 Samuel 17, 43. And the Philistines said unto David, oh, this is the coding of the Philistine right here. Am I a dog that thou cometh to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his God. So once again, kind of crazy all the connections that you can find with the animal given that fits perfectly in the time. Like we know that in the days of Saul and David, especially, the Philistines was one of their biggest adversaries, and he speaks of them being a dog, right? Which is what I have them being decoded as. And then now we're talking about the other main enemy at the time, Amorites / Moabites. Amorites was by him and said, even that which they build, if a fox go up, he shall even break down their stone wall. What are the odds of that, right? What are the odds of that? It's kind of weird to say that, not weird, but it's kind of funny that there is little words like that is actually helping decode a parable in Enoch that you never even heard of, that it matches up. These little words. I always say every single word, if translated in context properly, there's so much meaning that could just go over our heads, and just little details like that. We see how it is matching in ways that we didn't even think about with this indifferent animal dream vision. All right, verse 43. In that realm, Saul began to butt on either side those dogs, foxes, and wild boars till he had destroyed them all. 1 Samuel 11. And it was so on the morrow that Saul put the people in 3 companies, and they came into the midst of the host in the morning watch and slew the Amorites until the heat of the day. And it came to pass that they which remained were scattered, so that 2 of them were not left together. And the people said unto Samuel, who is he that said, shall Saul reign over us? Bring the men that we may put them to death. And Saul said, there shall not a man be put to death this day, for the day 2 day Hiah has wrought salvation in Yasharallah. So we see that Saul did bring salvation to Yasharallah through Saul. Verse 44. And that sheep, Samuel, whose eyes were opened, saw that ram, Saul, which was amongst the sheep, till it forsook its glory and began to butt those sheep and trampled upon them and behaved itself unseemingly. 1 Samuel 15. It repenteth me that I have set up Saul to be king, for he is turned back from following me and has not performed my commandments, and it grieved Samuel, and he cried unto Hiah all night. Verse 44. In that, verse 45. And the Adon of the sheep sent the lamb. We're now seeing the lamb. That is a new term, a new era per se, that we are now about to get to the righteous kings, the lamb, to another lamb, and raised it to be a ram and leader. See, we see ram and leader. Ram represents a leader of some sort of authority. Of the sheep instead of that ram, Saul, which had forsaken his glory. 1 Samuel 16. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the ruach of Hiah came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah, but the spirit of Hiah departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from Hiah troubled him. 46. And it went to it and spoke it alone and raised it, being a ram, and made it the prince and leader of the sheep. But during all these things, those dogs, the Philistines, oppressed the sheep. And the first ram, Saul, pursued that second ram, David, and that second ram arose and fled before it. And I saw till those dogs, the Philistines, pull down the first ram. 1 Samuel 23, then 1 Samuel 31. And Saul went on the side of the mountain, and David and his men on that side of the mountain. And David made haste to get away for fear of Saul. For Saul and his men compassed David and his men around about to take them. As we see, the first round pursued the second round. And now the second half, that second round was pulled down by the dogs. Verse 1 Samuel 31. Now the Philistines, the dogs, fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons, and the Philistines slew Jonathan, pretty much all Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. Then says Saul unto his armor bearer, draw thy sword and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armorer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. And obviously it says 47. It says, I saw the Philistines pull down that first round. Saul may have thrust the sword into him, but for sure he was about to die and wounded and pulled down by the Philistines first. All right, verse 48. In that second round, David arose and led the little sheep, and those sheep grew and multiplied, but all the dogs and foxes and wild boars feared and fled before it. And that ram butted and killed the wild beasts, and those wild beasts had no longer any power among the sheep, and robbed them no more of aught. 2 Samuel 8. Which also King David did dedicate unto Hiah with the silver and gold that he had dedicated of all the nations which he subdued, Syria and of Moab and the children of Ammon and of the Philistines and Amalek, and the spoil of Hadadezer, the son of Rahab, king of Zobah. And David got him a name when he returned from smiting the Syrians in the valley of Salt, being 18,000 men. And he put garrisons in Edom. Throughout all Edom, he put garrisons, and all they of Edom became David's servants. And Hiah preserved David whithersoever he went, and David reigned over all Yasharallah, and David executed judgment and justice unto all his people. So yes, we see that he put fear, and they had no power over Yasharallah. And for whatever reason, this is 49b. I don't know why sometimes they do certain translations like that, but this is 49b. And that ram David begat many sheep and fell aside, and a little sheep became ram, which is Solomon, in its stead, and became prince and leader of those sheep. 1 Kings 1:46. And also Solomon sitteth on the throne of the kingdom. And that house, the temple, became great and broad, and it was built for those sheep. And a tower lofty and great was built on the house for the Adon of sheep. And that house was low, but the tower was elevated and lofty. And Hiah of the sheep stood on the tower, and they offered a full table before him. And we see that in 1 Kings, the dedication of the temple with Solomon. And Hiah had performed his word that he spoke, and I am risen up in the room of David my father, and sit on the throne of Yasharallah, as Hiah promised, and have built an house for the name of Hiah, Alahiah of Yasharallah, and the king and all Yasharallah with him offered sacrifice before the Adon. All right, we have the green highlighted, which is the second history parable based on weeks of time. And now we're after that, Enoch 93, verse 7. After that, in the 5th week at its close, the glory of the house of glory and dominion shall be built forever. Still in chapter 89 of Enoch. Y'all see what I meant with the first 3 chapters are like that? 89 is for sure the longest. Once we get past 89, but 89 is thick. All right, so we're in 89 verses 51 through 67, the 2 kingdoms of Israel and Judah to the destruction of Jerusalem. And again, I saw those sheep, Israelites, that they began erred and went many ways and forsook that their house. The Adon of the sheep called some from amongst the sheep. And these are those that are called, these are the prophets coming in, and sent them to the sheep, but the sheep began to slay them. 1 Kings 18 and 4. And it was so when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Most High that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water. And one of them, speaking of Elijah the prophet, was saved and was not slain, and it sped away and cried aloud over the sheep. And they, specifically speaking, in the scripture we're reading, Jezebel sought to slay it, but Haya of the sheep saved it from the sheep and brought it up to me, which taken up like Enoch, and caused it to dwell there. Let's read 1 Kings 19 and 2 Kings 2. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. And Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so many the gods do to me and more also. If I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. And he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of Elohim. In 2 Kings 2:11. And they still went on and talked. Behold, chariots of fire and horses of fire separated the 2 of them, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Taken up, brought it up to me. And many other sheep, the prophets, he sent to those sheep. So he sent more prophets to those sheep to testify unto them and lament over them. And after that, I saw that when they forsook the house of Hiah and his tower, they fell away entirely, and their eyes were blinded spiritually. And I saw the Adon of the sheep, how he wrought much slaughter amongst them in their herds, until those sheep invited that slaughter and betrayed his place. 1 Kings 12:26. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom will turn back. So this is the separation of the kingdom and the paganism increasing in the land post Solomon. The kingdom will turn back to the house of David. If this people go up to offer sacrifices in the temple of Hiah at the Jerusalem, then the heart of this people will turn again to their Lord, to Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and return to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and he said to the people, you have gone up to Jerusalem long enough. Behold your gods, O Yasharallah, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And obviously we know that King Solomon perverted and betrayed the temple before his passing as well. 55. And he gave them over into the hands of the lions, which is Babylon. This is Daniel 7. And the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. That's all I need to read. This is in context Babylon. So Babylon was as a lion in Daniel, and I believe they're the same lion. Like I said, there's a lot of similarities by no coincidence with scripture in the canon. And tigers, I have that as a Syrian. The other main nation, we have the Babylonians and Assyrians are the two main nations during this time from the northern and the southern kingdoms that held them captive. Jeremiah 50:17. Israel is a hunted sheep driven away by lions. How about that? Babylon. First, the king of Assyria devoured them. Now, at last, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, was gone his bones. So we see Assyria and Babylon are the two main, that's directly captivity after the fall of the northern and southern kingdoms. So I have Babylon and the tigers, which, like I said, as we go, I'm adding them here as a reference. And wolves, Egypt, and hyenas, and no idea. I did not do the hyenas, and this is the only time it's mentioned, I believe, individually, which is why I didn't get enough context to just guess. I didn't want to just guess, and if that was the only time it mentioned it, then I was like, okay. And into the hand of the foxes, into all the wild beasts. And those wild beasts began to tear in pieces those sheep. And I saw that he forsook that their house and their tower and gave them all into the hand of the lions to tear and devour them, into the hand of all the wild beasts, the rest of the Gentile nations. 2 Kings 17:6. King of Assyria captured Samaria, and he carried the Israelites away to Assyria and placed them in Halah. So we have the captivity with the Assyrians. And then let me see, 56. Oh, did I mention? I think I forgot to put that up here, but this is with verse 56. We see the Chaldeans and bands of the Assyrians and bands of the Moabites and bands of the Amorites and sent them against Judah to destroy it, according to the word of Hiah that he spoke by his servants, the prophets. All right, so verse 57. And I began to cry aloud with all my power and to appeal to the Adon of the sheep and to represent to him in regard to the sheep that they were devoured by all the wild beasts. But he remained unmoved, though he saw it, and rejoiced that they were devoured and swallowed and robbed, and left them to be devoured in the hand of all the beasts. And he called 70 shepherds. Now, this is one of the hardest decoding debatables, especially, like I said, I come to a conclusion and I also look it up and see what other people come to make sure someone doesn't have a better perspective or point than I have. And that's a nice connection there though, Riley. Daniel in the lion's den in Babylon as well. So lion is matching through and through with Babylon. But the 70 shepherds, I'm about to be reading quite a bit on here. 59, but we'll get to the end. We're going to talk about the 70 shepherds. The 70 shepherds, the one of the biggest problems with decoding these 70 shepherds is that it's not written verbatim in scripture. You don't see the 70 shepherds the way it's depicted in this parable anywhere in scripture. So this is just a different perspective of the guidance, the spiritual guidance of man that isn't, like I said, just straight up written in scripture. So this is a very debatable who is the 70 shepherds here. But let's finish reading this verse. So he called 70 shepherds, which are what are shepherds, leaders. They lead the flock, right? So, and these are specifically of Israel. Very important that these shepherds are connected with leading his people, and cast those sheep to them that they might pasture them. And he spoke to the shepherds and their companions. Let each individual of you pasture the sheep henceforward, and everything that I shall command you, that do ye. So I want to make a point that the shepherds, these 70 shepherds, do not come in play until there is no more leadership of Yasharallah. So now, right after captivity, now they're officially in captivity of Babylon. And just showing. So now they're officially starting their captivity, and they're going to be pretty much in and out of captivity until the end of days. It's right when they begin in captivity is when these 70 shepherds come into play. Let's read about the idea of the 70 shepherds. I have quite a few verses here. Starting off in Luke 10. After these things, the Adon appointed other 70 also, and sent them 2 and 2 before his face into every city and place, whether he himself would come. Therefore said he unto them, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Adon of the harvest, that he would send forth laborers into his harvest. Go your ways. Behold, I send you forth as lambs among wolves. And the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Adon, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Notwithstanding in this rejoice not, that the spirits are subject unto you, but rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. Okay, all of this is just pointing out that from Luke and what we're about to get reading in all the other verses here is that 70 is a prominent number for his people / the overall idea of a nation and peoples, is that he uses 70 as a dominion number over not only the nations, but his people. So we see that he chose 70 disciples in Luke 10, and then now in Numbers 11:16. Then Hiah said to Moses, gather for me 70 men of the elders of Yasharallah, whom you know to be elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand there with you. So from the New Testament to the Old, we see the number 70 as the number to be chosen as a structure hierarchy over a people. Ezekiel 8:11. And before them stood 70 men of the elders of the house of Yasharallah. Once again, I'm not going to read the rest of the verse because it doesn't matter in this perspective of this point, but it's just showing from New Testament to Torah to prophets, he keeps the same 70 as dominion leadership over the people. And then I wanted to throw this verse in here in Isaiah 44:28 about Cyrus, that Cyrus is even called a shepherd, and he shall fulfill all my purpose. Okay. So we're just seeing that, not saying that this is specifically talking about someone like Cyrus, just throwing that out there that the Most High can make anybody a shepherd of his people, as Cyrus is here in Isaiah 44. And then I wanted to say the one of the arguments is that these are the 70 angels over the 70 nations. I went over that point. If you never heard of it, I touch on that point in the study called Ye Are Gods, on the 70 angels over the 70 nations. And once again, it's that number 70 that is given dominion over the world's nations, but each angel goes to each nation. The reason why we'll see by the end of this study, I don't believe it's the 70 angels over the 70 nations, is because that's literally what those are. Those 70 angels are over the 70 Gentile nations that were broken up at the Tower of Babel, which, if we finish reading here, the 70 angels which stood before him, come, we will descend and will there commingle their language, that a man shall not understand the speech of his neighbor. And this is Babel. The 70 angels was given over each of the 70 nations. But this is over just the shepherds. The 70 shepherds is just over the Israelites. And we know that Haya, the Most High's portion, is his people, and Yaakov is a lot of his inheritance. In other words, this wouldn't be 70 of the watchers, because Israel is his inheritance. He wouldn't give the watchers, his people, over to the watchers as an inheritance, as the 70 angels had with the nations. So definitely it's not the 70 angels over the 70 nations, because those are over other nations, and the Most High his lot is his people. And that come to a conclusion, 1 Peter 5. So I exhort the elders among you, as a fellow elder and a witness of the suffering of Messiah, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of Elohim that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as Elohim would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd, Mashiach, appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. In a nutshell, that's what's going on. These are regular people. Elders of the community are the 70 elders. And just like Peter is speaking as if he is a shepherd of the people. Shepherd the flock of Elohim. These are elders that are throughout time which you're going to see that these shepherds are not good shepherds. The 70 shepherds are the wicked shepherds that lead the sheep astray throughout the history of mankind, from the fall of the southern kingdom to the end of history. We're going to read about these shepherds leading the sheep astray. These are regular men like Peter, but they are not righteous. You'll see as we get reading more and more. All right. Verse 60. I will deliver them over unto you duly numbered, and tell you which. So he's speaking to the shepherds here. And tell you which of them are to be destroyed, and them destroy ye. And he gave over unto them those sheep. And he called another and spoke unto him, observe and mark everything that the shepherds will do to those sheep. So he's talking to an angel that is keeping track of our works. For they will destroy more of them than I have commanded them. In every excess in the destruction which will be wrought through the shepherds, record, namely, how many they destroy according to my command, and how many according to their own caprice. Record against every individual shepherd all the destruction he effects. And if we remember James chapter 3, verse 1, he says, let us not be many teachers. Let us not be many leaders, because you will be judged more harshly. That's what I believe we're reading here. We're reading the many leaders that led his people astray after receiving instructions, but they acted wickedly. And read out before me by number how many they destroy and how many they deliver over for destruction, that I may have this as a testimony against them in every deed of the shepherds, that I may comprehend and see what they do, whether or not they abide by my command which I have commanded them. But they shall not know it, and thou shalt not declare it to them, nor admonish them, but only record against each individual all the destruction which the shepherds effect, each in his time, and lay it all before me. And I saw till those shepherds pastured in their season. So, like I said, and that's another thing, we're not talking about an eternal being, because this is shepherds in their season. Men are born and they die. They're here for a season and then they're gone. And they began to slay and to destroy more than they were bidden, and they delivered those sheep into the hands of the lions. And who did that? Who delivered the Israelites into the hands of the lions? Leaders of Israel at the time, right? And the lions and tigers eat and devoured the greater part of those sheep, and the wild boars eat along with them, and they burnt that tower and demolished that house. And I'm gonna go ahead and finish reading before I go down. And I became exceedingly sorrowful over the tower, because the house of the sheep was demolished, and afterwards I was unable to see if those sheep entered that house. So we see that the Edomites, the wild boars, they burnt down that tower. Well, that's scripture as well. First Ezra 45, 4 and 45. You also vowed to build the temple which the Edomites burned when Judea was laid waste by the Chaldeans. Man, look how accurate that bad boy is. Scriptures own it. All right, still in 89. Verses 68 to 71. And the shepherds, leaders of Israel, and their associates delivered over those sheep to all the wild beasts, Gentiles, to devour them. And each one of them received in his time a definite number. It was written by the other in a book, how many each one of them destroyed of them. And each one slew and destroyed many more than was prescribed. And I began to weep and lament on account of those sheep. So let's read about these shepherds. Is actually, when it talks about shepherds, it's verbatim the same verbiage in Jeremiah and Ezra during the same time frame. Jeremiah was at the time where, well, let me go to the, this is why I have this. All right, so we have Jeremiah, and we're about to read Ezekiel. So we see Ezekiel is right after, but still coincides at the same time. And both of these are at the end of Kings, at the fall of his people in captivity. And this we'll read from Jeremiah and Ezekiel about the shepherds. Jeremiah 23 and Ezekiel 34. Woe to the shepherds. That's what I'm saying. This is so clear. This is leaders of Israel who destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture. declares Hayah. Therefore, thus says the Most High, the Elohim of Israel, concerning the shepherds who care for my people. You have scattered my flock and have driven them away, and you have not attended to them. Behold, I will attend to you for your evil deeds, declares the Most High. Then I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries where I have driven them, and I will bring them back to their fold, and they shall be fruitful and multiply. I will set shepherds over them who will care for them, and they shall fear no more, nor be dismayed, neither shall any be missing, declares the Most High. Behold, the days are coming, declares Hayah, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he shall reign as king, and deal wisely, and shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. In his days, Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell securely, and this is the name by which he will be called. Hayah is our righteousness. And then the same idea in Ezekiel 32, 2 through 10. Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Yasharallah. Prophesy and say to them, even to the shepherds, thus says Hayah, all shepherds of Yasharallah, who have been feeding yourselves, should not shepherds feed the sheep? You eat the fat, you clothe yourself with the wool, you slaughter the fat ones, but you do not feed the sheep. The weak you have not strengthened, the sick you have not healed, the injured you have not bound, the strayed you have not brought back, the lost you have not sought, and with force and harshness you have ruled them. So they were scattered, because there was no shepherd, no true shepherd, and they became food for all the wild beasts. Ain't that crazy? Look at the verbiage there. It talks about the shepherd and being food of wild beasts. Sounds like this parable. My sheep were scattered, and they wandered over all the mountains, and on every high hill. My sheep were scattered over all the face of the earth, with none to search or seek for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Adon as I live, declares Hayah. Surely because my sheep have become a prey, my sheep have become food for all the wild beasts, since there was no shepherd, and because my shepherds have not searched for my sheep, but the shepherds have fed themselves and have not fed my sheep. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the words of Hayah. Thus says the Adon, behold, I am against the shepherds, and I will require my sheep at their hand and put a stop to their feeding the sheep. And no longer shall the shepherds feed themselves. I will rescue my sheep from their mouths, that they may not be food for them. If that's not as clear as it gets of who are the shepherds, I don't know what is. It's the false leaders throughout the time, from the fall of the kings to the end of the world, is what we're going to read about with these shepherds. That's why I'm talking about them, because you're going to see they're brought up over and over again from now to the end of this study. Verse 70. And thus in the vision I saw that one who wrote, how he wrote down everyone that was destroyed by those shepherds day by day, and carried up and laid down, and showed actually the whole book to the Adon of the sheep, even everything that they had done, and all that each one of them had made away with, and all that they had given over to destruction. And the book was read before the Adon of the sheep, and he took the book from his hand and read it and sealed it and laid it down. All right, this is the last little passage of writing, 70 verses 72 through 77, and we're finally about to be done with chapter 89, the longest chapter. And this is during the time of captivity, from Cyrus to Alexander to the Maccabean revolt. So we're in the bulk of, well, not this one. So from, yeah, about this time frame, the three middle, Medo Persia, Greece, and we're about to get right into Rome right after the Maccabees. And so we are looking right around, what is it? About 500 BC to about 100 BC is the range we're getting into. You know what? Let's do a recap on the timeline. Yes, exactly. This is exactly what the shepherds are. The so-called pastors, priests, so-called prophets, all of those exactly. But the shepherds that he's singling out about those 70, these are wicked shepherds, though. The 70 shepherds that he's singling out that we're reading, because you're going to see that all these shepherds are guilty. So the 70 that he's pointing out are the 70 wicked, which the parable will show us what it means. I mean, show us that throughout it. And like I said, it's not saying that people like Peter wasn't a symbolic of a shepherd. The 70 shepherd are just specifically talking about the many wicked shepherds throughout the time of history. Verse 72. And forthwith I saw how the shepherds pastured for 12 hours, and behold, 3 of those sheep, Zerubbabel, Joshua, and I always say this wrong, Haggai, turned back and came and entered and began to build all that had fallen down of that house. But the wild boars, Edomites, tried to hinder them, but they were not able. And so we have 3 sheep. These are actually hard to pick the 3, because instead of Haggai, I was thinking Nehemiah, which is why I have a Nehemiah verse, was the main leader prophet that was also pushing for the rebuilding. But I chose these 3 because of what I'm about to read in right here in these 3 verses. Let's get it. In Ezra 5:2, then Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Joshua arose and began to rebuild the house. So Zerubbabel and Joshua are 100% 2 of the 3. Singled out in multiple books of being 2 prominent figures to begin to rebuild the house, which is all of what this is about, because they turned back and came and entered and began to build up all that had fallen down of that house. But then we have in Haggai, we see here the time of Darius, which is, I think, right after Artaxerxes, if I'm not mistaken, of the Medo Persia. You see here at the end of this time, I mean, during this time right here is when they were able to go back to rebuild after Babylon. And we see here, let me see. And the word of Hayat came by the hand of Haggai, the prophet, to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, and Joshua, the high priest. Thus says Hayat Shabbaoth, these people say the time has not yet come to rebuild the house of the Most High. Go up to the hills and bring wood and build the house, that I may take pleasure in it, and that I may be glorified, says the Most High. Then Zerubbabel and Joshua, with all the remnant of the people, obeyed the voice of Hayat their Elohim in the words of Haggai the prophet. And this is why, in a nutshell, why I chose those 3. That is why I chose those 3. Makes it clear. Like it's like those are the three. It said three, and those are the three. But an honorable mention, I'll mention Nehemiah, because he asked King Artaxerxes, now I have not been, let's see. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. So, and that's why Nehemiah came to mind, because I knew he was a part of getting back into Jerusalem to rebuild the city. But these three are together talked about and commanded by the Most High to rebuild the temple. And they began again to build as before, and they reared up that tower, and it was named the High Tower. And they began again to place a table before the tower, which I see as a symbol of sacrifices, but all the bread on it was polluted and not pure. Why? Why was it not pure? Because they didn't have the Ark of the Covenant. And the most important part of the sacrifices is actually being able to do them right, in a sense of finalizing a lot of the efforts of sacrifices is coincided with the holy items within the tabernacle. And during this time, even though they rebuilt it, it wasn't like the first time when everything was put in place and all was there, untouched and righteously clean. And as touching all this, the eyes of those sheep were blinded so that they saw not, and the eyes of the shepherds likewise. And they delivered them in large numbers to their shepherds for destruction. And they trampled the sheep with their feet and devoured them. And so, like I spoke about, all during this time, and then we get into the book of Maccabees, of just the time where they were being the shepherds, and everyone involved was just betraying his people, and they were Yasharallah was just a mess during the captivities for the most part. So we just taking some parts from First Maccabees here. This is literally the beginning of it. Verse 1 and 2, just setting the stage of the time frame. Alexander the Great. Then we talked about Darius. So they Alexander the Great attacked Darius, king of Persia, Medo-Persia. So we seeing that Greece is attacking and taking over of Medo-Persia's dominance. And then that's what I said. And then we have Rome next. So, but Greece is the time of Maccabees. For many of y'all, I hope this is a good little history lesson, right? Reviewing all the timeline and all the books and the structure of the mankind. So we see that Alexander, and then he enlarged the Greek Empire by defeating Darius and seizing his throne. So that's what's going on. Greece defeats Medo-Persia, which means they now Jerusalem is now under siege and attack of the Greeks. And so he seized the throne over the Greeks, and he fought many battles and captured fortified cities, and he put the kings of the region to death. And as he advanced to the ends of the earth, he plundered many nations. And when he had conquered the world, he became proud and arrogant. At that time, this is verse 11 now, there appeared in the land of Israel a group of treacherous Jews. Remember, we were talking about shepherds, right? Shepherds leading his people astray, and their shepherds likewise was blinded. Treacherous Jews who had no regard for the law, and who had a bad influence on many of our people. And they said, let's come to terms with the Gentiles, for our refusal to associate with them has brought us nothing but trouble. This proposal appealed to many people. See, leading people to the slaughter. That's what we're reading about the shepherds. And some of them became so enthusiastic about it that they went to the king and received from him permission to follow Gentile customs. They built in Jerusalem a stadium like those in the Greek cities. They had surgery performed to hide their circumcision, abandoned the Holy Covenant, and started associating with Gentiles, and did all sorts of other evil things. In the Adon, now verse 75, and the Adon of the sheep remained unmoved till all the sheep were dispersed over the field and mingled with them the Gentiles, which we just read. Look how nicely this is adding up. And they, the shepherds, did not save them out of the hand of the beast. And this one who wrote the book carried it up and showed it and read it before the Adon of sheep, and employed him on their account and besought him on their account, as he showed him all the doings of the shepherds and gave testimony before him against all the shepherds. And he took the actual book and laid it down beside him and departed. Woo! And that was chapter 89. All right, we're at chapter 90, and this is the beginning of the Hasmonean dynasty. This is the Hasmonean dynasty is is my understanding. Let's talk about this real quick. That Hasmonean dynasty to Rome governing Jerusalem. These two are going to be very closely related in the interpretation on this, because they represent the powers at bay that's governing over Jerusalem during the entire time, because we're about to get into the New Testament right here. So this is the powers that are governing his people. So now we are moving into pagan Rome and / that Hasmonean dynasty. And so let's speak on that real quick. The Hasmonean dynasty here was a ruler dynasty. A dynasty means it's like a bloodline of people that's in rulership. A dynasty of people of Hasmonean. So the ruling dynasty of Judea and surrounding regions during the Hellenistic times, the Second Temple, which is, like I said, right before the New Testament, going into the New Testament, as we read here, 140 BCE to 37 BCE. So right after the Maccabees, which the Hasmoneans are said to be lineage from the Maccabees that we read about, ironically, which is not surprising, because we see like the line of David went wicked immediately from Solomon and on. So we get this all throughout history, that you can have a righteous people, and then immediately after that, that righteous people's seed betrays the people because of the wickedness in mankind. But so just saying the time frame of where we're at. And then a big deal of this is we look, forces of Roman Republic intervened in the Hasmonean Civil War right before Messiah's time, 63 BCE, and made it into a client state, marking the decline of the Hasmonean dynasty. So that means the Hasmonean dynasty, the kingship over Israel, Judea, was under Roman rule. And Herod the Great, New Testament Edomite, displayed the last reigning Hasmonean client ruler in 37 BCE, the time through Messiah. So yeah, something important to kind of get that this is how we get, the Edomite king of Judea. That's how that came into place if you did not understand that. And so this is the time we're in. Hasmonean dynasty with Rome governing Jerusalem is the beginning of chapter 90. And I saw till that in this manner 35 shepherds. So now this is time is going by and less shepherds are left because less time is left. So now we have 35 shepherds undertook the pasturing of the sheep, and they severally completed their periods as did the first, and others received them into their hands to pasture them for their period, each shepherd in his own period. So you live and you die, and is passed on. And after that, I saw in my vision all the birds of heaven coming. The eagle, and I told you why I have these two kind of connected, because the eagle kind of symbolizes the governor rulership over Israel. So that's why I have the Hasmoneans, and then I also have Rome. And we also in Second Esdras we see a clear connection that Rome is the eagle, as we done with other scriptures. Second Esdras 12:11, the eagle which you saw coming up from the sea is the fourth kingdom, which appeared in a vision to your brother Daniel. Well, what do you know? The fourth kingdom, 1, 2, 3, 4. Rome. So Rome is the eagle, but like I said, for the King Herod being an Edomite king, that was because of the Hasmonean leadership. That's why I have both of them, because without the Hasmonean leadership, you wouldn't get an Edomite king over Judea, because Rome made them a client power to dictate. So, like I said, I have them as kind of both interchangeable in a sense of rulership. The vultures, scribes, the kites, Sadducees, and the ravens, Pharisees. So we're definitely in the New Testament, right? And by the way, this is why another reason to bring up the Hasmonean dynasty, because this is the beginning of all of these positions outside of, scribes has always been around, someone that simply is a worker of the writer of the books. But like I said, to have an Edomite king over Judea and to have Sadducees and Pharisees, you don't read about none of this in the Old Testament, because these positions were made during the time of the Hasmonean dynasty, leaderships, the new leadership over Judea, which is kind of small, but I found a little breakdown here in a nutshell. The Pharisees, and like I said, time frame when the sect appeared around 150 to 140 BC during the Hasmonean dynasty. Same thing with the Sadducees during the Hasmonean dynasty. The Pharisees are common people that are teachers, and the Sadducees are the priests and the high priest. So, but yeah, these positions became relevant under this new leadership of his people. And so that is what's going on right now. These new flocks, these are all of the air animals, because it's like rulership over directly over Israel. But the eagle led all of them. Absolutely. They were all under Roman / King Herod's rule. Led all the birds, and they began to devour those sheep and to pluck out their eyes and to devour their flesh. That sounds like Romans 8:36. As it is written, for thy sake we are killed all the day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. And the sheep, Israelites, cried out because their flesh was being devoured by the birds. And as for me, I looked and lamented in my sleep over that shepherd who pastured the sheep. And I saw until those sheep were devoured by the dogs. Philistines is still around, it looks here. And eagles and kites, and they left neither flesh nor skin nor sinew remaining on them, till only their bones stood there, and their bones too fell to the earth, and the sheep became few. Galatians 1:13. For ye have heard of my conversation in time past in the Jews' religion, how that beyond measure I prosecuted the church of Elohim and wasted it. I'm pulling this verse out here because this is the leaders and the Sadducees, the priests, the teachers. They are devouring them, and this is spiritual, which means they're putting a burden and they're giving them religion. They're blinding the eyes of the people. And we see that Pharisees, this is Paul speaking, they prosecuted the church and wasted it, which is what we're reading. They're devouring them. Now we're in chapter 90, verse 6 through 12. But behold, lambs, these are young southern kingdom, because now we're in the New Testament. Southern kingdom is Judah, Benjamin, and Levites. And it says lambs. So we're in a new era. They're talking about the people of Israel as lambs as a whole. And 1 Kings 12:23, just showing that Judah is Benjamin, Judah, and then Levites was all throughout all of the northern and southern kingdom. So Levites was also a part of the southern kingdom. Were born by those white sheep, and these are older Israelites here. So we have the lambs as young southern kingdom Israelites, and then we have older Israelites. And they began to open their eyes and to see and to cry to the sheep. And this is going on nowadays, where the young were born and their eyes are open and they're crying to their older sheep, our parents and others, to wake up. John 1. And this is the record of John. And this is just John is the example of one of the young sheep coming with instructions to the elders of Israel. When the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, who art thou? And he confessed and denied not, but confessed, I am not the Messiah. And they asked him, what then? Art thou Elijah? And he says, I am not. Art thou that prophet? And he answered, no. Then said they unto him, who art thou? That we may give an answer to them that sent us. What sayest thou of thyself? He said, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, to cry to those sheep. Make straight the way of the Adon, as said the prophet Isaiah. Continuing, yea, they cried to them, but they did not hearken to what they said to them, but were exceedingly deaf, and their eyes were very exceedingly blinded. And I saw in the vision how the ravens, Pharisees, slew upon those lambs, and took one of those lambs, John, and dashed the sheep in pieces and devoured them. And we know that technically that was done through King Herod, but this was we know the Pharisees pretty much had play in a lot of the wickedness that was going on in Judea. They were for sure the ringleaders of their time. Where am I? And I saw till horns grew upon those lambs, and the ravens cast down their horns. So there was wisdom rising, leadership rising, such as John, but then they were killing and casting them out. And I saw till there sprouted a great horn of one of those sheep. So this is, I kid you not, this is the thing that blew my mind. If you don't get this being Messiah, then who is this? Who is this? I don't even get it. This is the part that I was like, how do you not see this as Messiah? This is the only one that said, this is the only person that is animal that is said to have a great horn. And when you follow the timeline, we're right in line with the New Testament. I mean, I don't get it. How do you not see it? So I saw till there sprouted a great horn of one of those sheep, which is obviously Yeshua Mashiach. And their eyes were opened. So let's touch on that great horn. What's a horn on a sheep? A ram, right? A ram. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. John 19:2. And the soldiers planted a crown of thorns on his head. The ram, the thicket of thorns, is caught in the thicket of thorns by his horns. The thorns of crown on Messiah's head. The lamb wearing the crown of thorns, symbolic of the ram with the horns. Come on, let's go. The horn, the great horn that grew from that sheep is no other than Messiah. And then who else is this? One man sprouted a great horn. And then that one man opened their eyes. Oh my goodness. And then we have the literal fact of it, of Messiah coming over, and he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And the disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Yahshua answered, neither has this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of Elohim should be made manifest in him. What was the reason why this man specifically was blind? So everyone could see that he will open the eyes of the blind. And I'm saying that this is showing that it's not spiritual. I'm saying it is spiritual, but I'm also showing that it's like in the flesh as well. He comes with full power in the flesh and in the spirit. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said unto him, go wash in the pool of this place. And he went thereon, washed, and came seeing. So let's go spiritual now. Acts 26:8. Messiah came to open their eyes and to turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan unto Elohim, that they may receive forgiveness of sin and inheritance among them which are sanctified by faith that is in me. Isaiah 42, the prophecy of Messiah coming to open the eyes of the blind. I, the Adon, have called thee in righteousness, and will hold thy hand, and will keep thee, and give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles, to open the eyes of the blind. Like, who is this? Because we're totally out of the New Testament. I mean, Old Testament. To bring out prisoners from the prison, and them that sit in darkness out of the prison house. Like, what time are we in? We're not in the Old Testament. Who else is fulfilling this prophecy? And if there is no New Testament, then why are we given this understanding if there's no books to compare it to? Everything has been comparable for the most part, has it not? So you're telling me this part isn't comparable? Verse 10, and it looked at them and their eyes opened, and it cried to the sheep, and the rams saw it and all ran to it. Let's go Matthew 9. And when the devils was cast out, the dumb spoke, and the multitude marveled, saying, it was never so in Israel. But the Pharisees said, he casts out devils through the prince of the devils. And Yasha went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moving with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. All right, verse 11. And notwithstanding all this, those eagles, vultures, ravens, kites, still kept tearing the sheep and whooping down upon them and devouring them. Still the sheep remained silent, but the ram lamented and cried out. Matthew 15. Then came Yasha's scribes and Pharisees. What we got? That is vultures and ravens, which were of Jerusalem, saying, why do thy disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? Man's tradition, religion, like I spoke earlier when I was talking about the Jews' religion, Judaism, prosecuting the church. It's what's still going on. Traditions of the elders, Talmud. Matthew 17:24, when they were come to Capernaum, they received tribute money, they that received tribute money came to Peter. So just showing you that they're being taxed locally in the land, unrighteous tribute money for Capernaum. And then we're seeing also in Matthew 22 of Caesar's, show me thy tribute, and to give the Caesar what are Caesar's. Just so it's just different ways of how they were beating down all of the eagle, vultures, ravens, are beating them down spiritually, financially, and just destroying their lives, really. And those ravens, the Pharisees fought in battle with it. It sought to lay low its horn, but they had no power over it. Sounds like Matthew 12. Then the Pharisees went out and held a council against him, how they might destroy him. But when Yasha knew it, he withdrew from his forth, and great multitudes followed, and he healed them all. All right, we almost done here, y'all. I know it's long, buddy, but we almost there. All right, we're in the last chapter now, chapter 90, Enoch, verse 13 through 19. The last assault of the religious leaders on the Messiah. And I saw till the shepherds and eagles and vultures and kites, and they cried to the ravens that they should break the horn of that ram. Like, who is this if this isn't the Messiah? I kid you not. Like, I just can't fathom the stuff people got to make up to replace the Messiah in all of these points. So Luke 169, and he has raised up a horn. Let's talk about that horn symbolization with the Messiah. That horn is the horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David. And they battled and fought with it, and it battled with them and cried that his help might come. And I saw till that man, we're talking about an angel here, who wrote down the names of the shepherds and carried up into the presence of the Adon. So just now it's done this throughout. I told you it was going to keep mentioning the shepherds being recorded as being wicked. Of the sheep, it came and helped it and showed it everything. he had come down for the help of that ram. So this is talking about the angel who was riding down the shepherds came down and helped. And we see in Matthew that angels did come and help minister to Messiah. Then the devil leaveth him, and behold, angels came and ministered unto him. And I saw till the Adon of the sheep came unto them in wrath, and all who saw him fled, and they all fell into his shadow from before his face. And all the eagles and vultures and ravens and kites were gathered together, and there came with them all the sheep of the field. Yea, they all came together and helped each other to break that horn of the ram. We know this scene. This is the scene where he's been handed over to be prosecuted, and all of the Pharisees and all the people are saying, kill him, and etc., etc. Let's read John and Matthew here. Judas then, having received a band and officers from the chief priests, like Sadducees and Pharisees, cometh thither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then the band and the captain and officers of the Jews took Messiah and bound him. Yep, we read all of them were gathered together. Matthew 26, and they that had laid hold on Messiah led him away to Yosef. Oh man, I know I was going to forget how to pronounce this. Kai Yaphis. Oh my goodness, forget it. The high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. So we're seeing all of them here. We have the chief priests, Pharisees, scribes, elders. They were gathered together. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false witness against Messiah to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. At the last came 2 false witnesses. This is, I don't even understand. I want to bring it up again. Who in the world is this talking about anymore? Like, this is what I'm talking about. The Messiah is through and through in the book of Enoch. This is the history of mankind. There is no scripture other than the New Testament that is fulfilling what we're reading here. And then once again, in another history vision of the weeks of the world in Enoch 93, listen to this. And after that, in the 6th week, all who live in it shall be blinded. This is what we just got done reading up here about the blinded, the shepherds and the flock were blinded. Forget trying to find it. In the hearts of all of them shall godlessly forsake wisdom, and in it a man shall ascend. Are you talking about the Messiah ascending to heaven after his resurrection? Yeah. So another history parable within Enoch is, so we have 2 different parables we're reading right now that matches up with the New Testament. And who else is this in the New Testament? And at its close, the house of dominion shall be burnt with fire. What happened around 70 AD, right after Messiah's ascension? The fall of Jerusalem, the house of the Most High. And the whole race of the chosen root shall be dispersed. Wow. I mean, wow. All over it. The book of Enoch is a messianic book, which is why Messiah quotes from the book of Enoch. Why would Messiah quote from a book that he's not in? All right, chapter 90, verse 20 through 27. And I saw that man, which is an angel, who wrote the book according to the command of the Adon, till he opened that book concerning the destruction. So we're at the judgment of the fallen angels, the shepherds, and the apostates. And so we're pretty much, and this is another thing that shows you what I mean, that this parable was written with with what we were going to be given for scripture, because the moment after they they went to break the horn of the ram, it goes right into judgment. Right into judgment. Why? Because if it's kept talking about history after Messiah, there's no scripture to compare it to. It like, really think about how beautifully that connection is in solidifying the New Testament, because none of this would have been spoken if there was no writing to match it. This is why the moment after the New Testament is over, which is the death of Messiah, and then over here we talk about his ascension, it goes right into the end of days, the book of Revelation. Well, how about that? You have everything in the New Testament is written about Messiah's life and how to live, and then it jumps to the book of Revelation, the same format that this parable gives us. All right. And I saw that man, which is an angel, who wrote the book according to the command of the Adon, till he opened that book concerning the destruction which those 12 last shepherds had wrought. So we're at the end of the days. The time has passed. Shepherds are getting less and less. And I showed that they had destroyed much more than their predecessor before the Adon of the sheep. Matthew 15:14. Let them alone, they being blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch, which is what's going on with the shepherds. And I saw till the Adon of the sheep came unto them, and took his hand the staff of his wrath, and smote the earth. And the earth clave asunder, and all the beasts and all the birds of the heaven fell from among those sheep, and were swallowed up in the earth, and it covered them. And this is, like I said, we're right in the book of Revelation now. And out of the mouth goeth a sharp sword, and that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod. And rod can also be staff of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of Almighty Elohim. And then also Revelation 16. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And this is what we're looking at. Swallowed up in the earth. An earthquake, they fell in the earth because of an earthquake, and it swallowed them up. Verse 19. And I saw till a great sword was given to the sheep, and the sheep proceeded against all the beasts of the field to slay them, and all the beasts of the birds of the heaven fled before their face. And we know that this is the 144 coming down to judge the earth. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written on their foreheads. Verse 19, verse 20, and I saw till a throne was erected in the pleasant land, and the Adon of the sheep sat himself thereon, and the other took the sealed books and opened those books before the Adon of the sheep. And we have another verse from Gad. Gad chapter 14:7 talks directly about that book of life. And then a man, it is in the book of Gad, they call an angel a man as well, as what we're reading here. Dressed in linen, brought before the glory of Haya 3 books that contain the records of every man. Verse 21, and the Adon called those men the 7 first white ones, which are angels. Enoch 20, who are the 7 angels? These are the names of the holy angels who watch. Here we go. Uriel, Raphael, Raguel, Michael, Seraquel, Gabriel, and Remiel, 7 white ones, and commanded that they should bring before him, beginning with the first star, which led them astray. I put Simyaza. I think I actually put the wrong person here. I think this actually meant to be. Let me see. Well, whichever. I already told you my explanation that Azazel was before it, but I already told you. I ain't gonna trip on it. The first star which led the way, all the stars whose private members were like horses, and they brought them all before him. Let's read Enoch 69 here. Oops, I think I accidentally. Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm tripping. And the third was named Gadarael, and he it is who showed the children of men all the blows of death, and he led astray Eve, and showed the weapons of death to the sons of men, the shield and the coat of mail and the sword for battle, and all the weapons of death to the children of men. So I just wanted to bring him in. I said I was going to bring him up earlier. And so those are the three main like corporates: Azazel, Simyaza, and Gadarael. I said my piece. I'm not going to speak on it anymore with the structure of that. So verse 22, and he said to that man who wrote before him, bring one of those 7 white ones. Even though I do think this actually, I should have put Azazel here, by the way. I do think this is supposed to be Azazel. So just want to clarify that. Being one of those 7 white ones, it said to him, take those 70 shepherds to whom I delivered the sheep, and who, taking them on their own authority, slew more than I commanded. So let's read 70 shepherds, judgment of them. Zechariah 10:3. My anger is hot against the shepherds, and I will punish the leaders. For Haya Shabbaoth cares for his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like his majestic steed in battle. In Matthew 25, when the Son of Man comes in the glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on his left. Then the king will slay to those on his right. Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundations of the world. That's what we're reading right now. Now, verse 23, and behold, they were all bound, I saw, and they all stood before him. And judgment was held first over the stars, and they were judged and found guilty. So that's another reference, what makes it so clear that the shepherds are not angels, because this is making it clear that the angels, stars are angels, that the angels were judged first and found guilty and went into the place of condemnation, and they were cast into an abyss full of fire and flaming and full of pillars of fire. And those 70 shepherds were judged and found guilty. So we have the angels judged first, and now it's the wicked leaders of Israel was judged next and found guilty, and they were cast into the fiery abyss. And I saw at that time how a like abyss was opened in the midst of the earth, full of fire, and they brought those blinded sheep, and they were all judged and found guilty and cast into this fiery abyss, and they burned. And now this abyss was to the right of that house, and I saw those sheep burning and their bones burning. And Revelation 19 and 20. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet. This is what it sounds like. The beast, like the angels and shepherds that wrought miracles before him, which he deceived them that received the mark of the beast, and them that worship the image. These both were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. Talking about the fiery abyss. Revelation 20. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before Elohim, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. And we see, and I saw those sheep burning and their bones burning. And now getting to the end, obviously the end of the history. See, that's it. That's all we have left. Now, for some reason, don't ask me why, the following chapter of 93 for this parable is 91. It's named 91 in that order, but this is still the same parable of the weeks of mankind. And after that, in the seventh week shall an apostate generation arise, and many shall be its deeds, and all its deeds shall be apostate, which is where we have the judgment of the apostates. And at its close shall be elected the elect righteous of the eternal plant of righteousness to receive sevenfold instructions concerning all his creation. And then the next chapter, and after same vision, these are the same vision. And after that, there shall be another, the eighth week, that of the righteous, and a sword shall be given to it, that the righteous judgment may execute on the oppressors. Which we read the 144,000, and Messiah coming down, and the sinners shall be delivered into the hands of the righteous. And oh my goodness, this is it. Woo! Chapter 90, the remaining verses 28 through 38. The New Jerusalem, the conversion of the surviving Gentiles, the resurrection of the righteous, the Messiah. And I stood up to see till they folded up that old house and carried off all the pillars, and all the beams and ornaments of the house were at the same time folded up with it, and they carried it off and laid it in a place in the south of the land. And I saw till the Adon of the sheep brought a new house, greater and loftier than that first, obviously the New Jerusalem, and set it up in the place of which had bare folded up. All its pillars were new, and ornaments were new and larger than those of the first. The old one which he had taken away, and all the sheep were within it. Revelation 12:2. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from Elohim out of heaven, prepared as a bride or adorned for her husband. Continuing, verse 30, and I saw all the sheep which had been left, and all the beasts on the earth, and all the birds of the heaven, falling down and doing homage to those sheep, making petition to and obeying them in everything, which we see the inheritance of the Gentiles, Isaiah 14. For the Adon Haya will have mercy on Jacob, and will choose Israel, and set them in their own land, and the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the Gentiles, the remaining Gentiles, shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of Haya for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. Verse 31, and thereafter those three who were clothed in white, these are angels, and has seized me by my hand, and the hand of that ram, this is angelic Messiah he's speaking of, also seizing hold of me. They took me up and set me down in the midst of those sheep before the judgment took place. And those sheep were all white, and their wool was abundant and clean. And all that had been destroyed and dispersed, and all the beasts of the field and all the birds of heaven assembled in that house. And the Adon of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because they were all good and had returned to his house. And we see that this is including the Gentiles, because they're saying all the beasts of the field and the birds and assembled in the house. So they're saying this is not just the sheep and the rams and the good cat, like the Israelites. These are all the beasts. As we've been saying, all the beasts of the field represent Gentile nations. And that's what they're saying. Gentiles is a part of this house. And I saw till they laid down that sword which had been given to the sheep, and they brought it back into the house, and it was sealed before the presence of the Adon, and all the sheep were invited into that house, but it held them not. And Second Esdras, I read this so many different times, but it just fits so perfect. We're going to do it again. Take again your full number. And that's just really what this is talking about when it says held them not, that it was full, that the capacity of the number to be reached has been made. O Zion, conclude the list of your people who are clothed in white. This is what we just read. All the sheep were all white. Who have fulfilled the law of the Adon. The number of your children whom you desired is full. Beseech the Adon's power that your people who have been called from the beginning may be made Kodesh, holy. I, Ezra, saw Mount Zion a great multitude, which I could not number, and they all were praising Haya with songs. In their midst was a young man of great stature, taller than any of the others, and on the head of each of them he placed a crown. But he was more exalted than they, and I was held spellbound. Then I asked an angel, who are these, my Lord? He answered and said to me, these are they who have put off mortal clothing and have put on the immortal. And they have confessed the name of Haya. Now they are being crowned and receive palms. Then I said to the angel, who is that young man who places crowns on them and puts palms in their hands? He answered and said to me, he is the son of Elohim, whom they confess in the world. So I began to praise those who had stood valiantly for the name of Haya. Man, wow. Verse 35, and the eyes of them all were opened, and they saw the good, and there was not one among them that did not see. And I saw that that house was large and broad and very full. And I saw that white bull was born. And this is now back out of, now this is what we're seeing. We see that right here in this last passage here that Messiah is referred to as a ram. And then we're seeing this is Messiah as well. Talking about, and I saw that white bull was born. This is like specifically talking, because right here, this was him talking about the ram that he spoke about in time past of what we read about. So now where this is New Jerusalem Messiah is being spoken about here. And it says that the white bull, and this is the same back at what we started off with the parable with Adam. Adam was a white bull. And coincidentally enough, it is in 1 Corinthians 15, the first man, Adam, was made a living soul. The last Adam was made a quickening spirit. Howbeit that was not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, and afterwards that which is spiritual. The first man is of the earth, earthy. The second man, Messiah, is of the Adon from heaven. And that's why I feel like what's happening here, that he is now called a white bull with large horns, and all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air feared him and made petition to him all the time. Revelation 12. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, a moon under her feet, and upon her head 12 crowns. And she, bringing with child, cried, travailing in pain to be delivered. And she brought forth a man child. This is what I'm saying, like it was the reborn version of Messiah in the kingdom, who was to rule all nations with the rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto Elohim and to his throne. Verse 38, and I saw till all their generations were transformed, and they all became white bulls. Well, exactly. Messiah is a white bull. We became white bulls. That's 1 John 3:2. Beloved, now are we the sons of Elohim, and it does not yet appear what we shall be, but we shall know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. We become white bulls as Messiah becomes a white bull. And the first among them became a lamb. And this is just what we're seeing now is them showing the positions of Messiah. Messiah was the lamb, meaning the first fruit sacrifice that was the first fruits that was resurrected. The sacrificial lamb is what we're seeing. Just these are all Messiahs, guaranteed. And we see in 1 Corinthians 15, but now is Mashiach risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in Messiah shall all be made alive. And that's why I believe the understanding of why they bring up the lamb is that he is the first fruits of that sacrifice that gives everybody resurrection. And that lamb became a great animal. And that great animal is the white bull with great horns. And had great, black horns on his head. And Haya of the sheeps rejoice over it and over all the oxen, which we see in Revelation 22. And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb shall be in it, and the servant shall serve him, and they shall see his face, and his name shall be there in their foreheads. Verse 39, and I slept in their midst, and I awoke and saw everything. This is the vision which I saw a while I slept, and I awoke and blessed the Adon of righteousness and gave him glory. Then I wept with a great weeping, and my tears stayed not till I could no longer endure it. When I saw, they flowed on account of what I had seen, for everything shall come and be fulfilled. And all the deeds of men in their order were shown to me. On that night I remembered the first dream, and because of it I wept, and it was troubled. It was troubled because I seen that vision. Woo! And in closing, we have the final parable, other parable we've been matching up, vision of the history in Enoch 91, verse 13 through 17. And at its close they shall acquire houses through their righteousness, and a house shall be built for the great king in glory forever. More. And all mankind shall look to the path of uprightness. And after that, in the 9th week, the righteous judgment shall be revealed to the whole world, and all the works of the godless shall vanish from all the earth, and the world shall be written down for destruction. And after this, in the 10th week, in the 7th part, there shall be the great eternal judgment, in which he will execute vengeance amongst the angels. And the first heaven shall depart and pass away, and the new heaven shall appear, and all the powers of the heavens shall give sevenfold light. And after that, there will be many weeks without number forever. And all shall be in goodness and righteousness, and sin shall no more be mentioned forever. Shabbat Shalom for this extra long new moon study. Thank y'all for joining me. And I'll see y'all on the next one. Shalom.